The Taming of Coyote, Chapter 12. Sonia scrunched up her face and absently swung her hand in front of her face. She was in transition. She had slept so soundly, but now she was gradually beginning to wake. As she did, wonderful sensations became clear to her. She was warm, dry, she didn't stink, and, in fact, nothing smelled bad. It smelled so good. Slowly, Sonia opened her eyes. She had to swallow quickly to keep from drooling as her mouth watered. What was that wonderful aroma? She looked around. This wasn't exactly the type of shelter she expected to find herself in when she chose to ride on Coyote's back. This wasn't some cave or glen. This was a home. It was a large cabin made of wood and stone. It was roomy, it was cozy, and it was a very welcome sight. She was nestled in a large bed made of large wooden poles, bone, and the large racks of deer that had shed them or met an otherwise sad end. She was covered in heavy comforters, quilts, blankets, and sheets. When she sat up to wipe her eyes, she realized that she was not dressed in the clothes that she had been in previously. In fact, now she was dressed only in a long button-up white shirt. It hung low on her like a nightgown. Beside her, on the floor, Ezra had been napping on the rug. However, at the sound of her rustling, he had lifted his head to investigate. Finding that she was fine, he opened his mouth in a smile and panted with a sense of contentment. A bubbling sound pulled her attention to the doorway. She could hear fires crackling. One was in the bedroom with her, safely in a stone hearth. She was sure there was one to be heard in the den. It was likely a hearth or stove was going in the kitchen as well. Was the cabin even that big? She wanted to investigate, but was forced to sigh in frustration when she realized she was unable to walk. Her foot was swollen and wrapped carefully. That was a real downer to her excitement. She was just itching to explore this new place. She wanted to meet the host that was so kind to take in a lost child from a pair of coyotes. Speaking of Coyote, she wanted to thank him for his kindness. Ezra let out a yip. That pulled Sonia from her pout. He seemed awfully excited about something all of a sudden. It was no wonder. The wonderful smell grew more and more intense. Her eyes flew to the door as someone came into the bedroom. She gasped as a man entered. He carried in his hands a tray. On the tray were dishes and a cup of drink. He was a complete stranger, that was for sure. She had never seen him before. "Oh, good. You're awake," he smiled. His voice sounded slightly familiar, but was still new to her. "Now that you've gotten a good amount of rest, and everything else, all that's left is to give you a full belly. This will really stick to your ribs and ease away all that tension." "Who are you?" Sonia asked, slightly aware that perhaps that was a little rude. It wasn't the most polite way to greet someone who was being so hospitable. The man's eyes grew wide a moment, as if he couldn't believe she would ask such a thing. Then, realization hit him, and his features softened as he let out a good-natured laugh. It sounded almost hoarse, yet to him it was natural. "Right! I forgot that you've not seen me like this. I can't even recall the last time anyone from Turn has seen the likes of me." He set the tray across Sonia's lap. "Is that shirt comfortable? It was the biggest one I had. I haven't had human company in so long. I don't really have things suitable for young girls to wear." "I'm fine. Thank you." Did he forget that she had asked him a question? Ezra sat up and licked his lips. The food in the bowl before Sonia smelled divine. It was a stew of some sort. Some sliced bread was on a plate beside it. There was a glass of water as well as a mug of tea. Ezra came closer and rested his head on the edge of the bed. Oh, such wonderful smells. He wanted some. Maybe she would be generous enough to accidentally drop some for him. The strange man scratched his head. running his fingers through his long hair, and chuckled. "You must be a special person. Wild coyotes normally don't just randomly bond with humans, especially a human from Tern. He has remained by your side this entire time, leaving only to relieve himself outside. He is a very loyal fellow." "Where is the other one?" Sonia asked. "A large coyote brought me here." "That would be me, Sonia," he replied. Her expression paled in disbelief. He had to have been joking, and it wasn't funny. It was almost as if he could read her thoughts. Either that, or he was mocking her naivety. "I am Coyote." "You?" she breathed. He knew of Coyote, and he knew her name. She tried desperately to wrap her mind around such a queer possibility. Could it really be? Logic would certainly tell her that it was not, but then again, logic also told her that animals didn't talk. That theory was out the window. She had heard Coyote talk with her own ears, seen his mouth move to the words. Could it be that he also had the power to take on a human form? Would that be so strange? Wasn't that how the stories about him went in Tern? He had taken a human form to woo Lorraine, and now she could see the very creature that had fooled the would-be witch into matrimony. Sonia figured as much. Coyote was so unique and strangely colored, yet no evidence of those colors and markings showed on what little skin she could see. The only evidence that she could compare was the jagged scar on Coyote's left wrist. It matched the one that she had seen just above his left forepaw. Truth be told, when she had heard tales of Coyote, she had expected something quite different than what she was seeing before her. He was taller than she was, a full-grown man. She would have almost pegged him in his 40s, yet with a youthful something about him. For a spirit, otherkin, or devil, she would have expected an adolescent or a youthful-looking Adonis. This was certainly not the case. Coyote was no troll, but he was no beauty king either. He was a pale-skinned individual. It was almost a ghostly white in color. He had a large forehead, or so it appeared, as his hairline seemed to lift. His bangs seemed to stand on end and droop forward in an attempt to cover some of the head. His hair was blonde, almost yellow in color, like a daffodil. His figure was a matter of some confusion. For someone so powerful, Sonia would have expected big muscles and massive limbs to show his strength. His strength was obvious to her, even in the little he had displayed. Yet, he didn't look as if he had too much strength in this form, though he was quite capable of proving her wrong. His limbs were rather small and thin, as if he did very little manual labor. His body was shaped a bit like a pear, his belly inviting and marshmallowy. She wouldn't call him fat, but he certainly showed the signs of an older man who enjoyed food and drink, yet had enough initiative to keep from turning into one big round ball of blubber. No, he wasn't a blob. He wasn't a troll. He didn't even look like a devil. And he certainly was no dish for women to fight over. He looked like an almost normal man. In all honesty, she almost had the urge to squeeze and snuggle him as he lifted the blanket to examine and redress her ankle. He just had that strange sort of air and aura about him. "You've got quite a bit of swelling. That was one doozy of a sprain." "What is this?" Sonia asked. She pointed to the stew-like substance in the bowl with her spoon. "That is something that the people of Tern have missed out on for years. There are many fruits in these woods, abundant enough to feed the villages all around and all the creatures within. Yet I do not allow those who are unworthy to sample upon them. It's rabbit stew. It is very rare for Turnians to place rabbit or any woodland creature to their palate. It's like nothing you've ever tasted before. It will certainly do you good." He gave a small chuckle. "I don't think raw meat suits a human being the same way it does a wild animal." "How?" she gasped. Why would he mention something like that? Oh, I could smell it. And I am fluent in Coyote tongue. Ezra informed me about your entire little adventure. He covered her back up and sat on the edge of the bed. Ezra let out an annoyed sneeze, as it meant he had to leave the bedside and get back to the floor. He thinks very highly of you. The parts that he gave you to eat are the parts normally reserved for only the highest-ranking members of a pack. You must have been either very smart, or you must have been very hungry to have ingested this gift. This time, you are lucky enough to have the meal cooked for you. You also get the benefit of vegetables and other goodies mixed in. You'll find this more to your liking and taste, I believe. You are a woodland god, aren't you? You don't seem like a devil at all, she said, as she lifted the spoon to her mouth. After a slurp and a swallow, she let out a very pleased, "Oh, yum!" "A god," Coyote repeated, with a bit of surprise. "You flatter me, Sonia, but I am certainly no god. My power is very great and can influence many things in these woods, and even the outreaches of some of the territories taken by villages. However, my powers are not that infinite to be compared to those of a god. Things would be very different, and would have turned out very differently if such a thing were true." As he spoke, he removed his coat and hung it on a hook on the wall. That left him in a dusty button-up shirt, his pants, a leather belt through the loops, and an open vest over his shirt. She could see his scar more clearly now. She said nothing, though, and brought another spoonful of rabbit stew to her mouth. The silence hung quite low. It made her feel a bit awkward. She had so many questions, but she was not very confident about how bold he would tolerate her behaving. Besides, the meal presented to her was so welcome. Coyote seemed to be much different as a man than as an animal. There was a gentle nature to him that lacked as a beast. He was surely capable as either, but he seemed a bit more soft-natured and predictable in a form she could associate with. "Would you like another bowl?" Sonia was forced to snap out of her thoughts. She let out an absent, "Huh?" as she realized he had spoken to her. He was waiting for an answer. She glanced down at her bowl and realized it was empty. Had she really been that hungry? There was great pleasure in ingesting this food. The texture, the warmth, the taste. It was also wonderful on her palate. It brought about a blush. She did want more, but it would seem so unladylike to be such a glutton. He seemed to see right through her. "It's perfectly all right. There's plenty." Shyly, Sonia lifted her bowl. "Please?" He gave a nod and took the bowl from her. He returned it only a few moments later. When he returned her bowl to her, she was quick to start spooning it up. Coyote's face softened as he watched her ravenous behavior. She was so familiar. Of course, he had met her before, seen her before. He'd watched her play in his woods, met her a few times in turn, and met her off the road. Still, it went much deeper than that. "Are you all right?" Sonia asked, suddenly seeing sadness in his yellowed green eyes. "Do I have something on my face? Why are you looking at me like that?" "Huh?" That seemed to pull him from his nostalgic thoughts. "Oh, it's nothing. I was just thinking about someone I knew a long time ago." Sonia swallowed another mouthful of stew. It was then that a concern came over her. "Coyote, what are you going to do with me?" That question made perfect sense to Sonia. However, Coyote seemed very confused and surprised. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to help your ankle get better." "But then what?" More confusion showed on his face. "I'm afraid I don't follow." "Well, I'm from Tern, sir. You have already said yourself that you have a vendetta against my village. You encourage your coyotes to kill my people. The villagers are probably lucky enough to get to care to help them in their time of need. But my survival, serving no purpose to anyone, has thus far been pure luck. How long will that luck last?" "You worry too much, Sonia. You don't have to call me sir. There is no need to be so formal." "Will you kill me?" she asked bluntly. He seemed a bit offended by the question. What a foolish thing to ask. Why would I go through all of this trouble if I was just going to kill you in the end? Well, then what? If Turn should forever feel your wrath, doesn't that include me as well? Would you send me home to live in fear of the day I drop from your favor? Or will you spare my life, only to drop me in another village where I would be surrounded by strangers? We'll worry about what we will do with you when that time comes, he replied simply. In reality, Coyote hadn't gotten that far in his plan. Even he was torn about what to do with Sonya. However, for now, her company pleased him. Do you hate me? The question, so timid and meek, came as a surprise to him. No, I don't hate you. In fact, you bring me a calm to my soul that I have not felt in a very long time. I see in you a spark, however small, almost the fading glow of a cinder that reminds me of a time long ago. You are not like the people you live with. You would have handled things very differently if you were. You are so brash yet timid before me. Yet this is the same child that chose to defend me, fed me, and scolded me. In you, I see the heart of Turn so long extinguished. Before the church, you mean? Your clothes should be dry for you tomorrow if you wish, Coyote said, changing the subject abruptly. I doubt you will want to stay in my shirts. Sonya pouted. Coyote had no interest in talking about such matters. She had no idea just how hard she'd be able to push him. How much would he tolerate from her? So she chose to remain silent. In turn, he did too at first. Stay off that foot for a while. Just call if you will need anything.